Hello, welcome to Salt and or Sanctuary. This is another episode of Intelligent Design, and this is 2D Dark Souls. So I've been talking a bunch about this game, haven't I, Reuben? Oh, Reuben's here.
Yeah, hey, how you guys doing? Yeah, you've been chatting about this game for weeks, and saying, it's so good, and we have to talk about this game, and so it's going to be good to kind of see it in action and see what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Salt and Sanctuary is, again, 2D Dark Souls. I like to say that it is to Dark Souls, and you can see I've got a lot of playthroughs and stuff going on. It is to Dark Souls as Hearthstone is to Magic the Gathering. It basically says, what is this game? How does it work? A Minecraft to Terraria is perhaps an even better example because that's a 3D to a 2D game. But it
Yep.
says, what's this amazing game that people really, really like? How can we capture what makes it work and adapt it to a new environment? It's basically the same skill set as adapting a book to a movie when you switch genres like this. So we're going to see the core of how it works. Now we're going to name ourselves Reuben. There we go.
Okay, spelled my name right. Seems good. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. First, I was going to do like a Rube joke. All right, so we've got our opening class system. Looks very Dark Soulsy, even with like the old text and the fonts and the things like that. Now, like Dark Souls, there's only two things that actually matter here: your starting class and your effects. Now, your effects basically give you a bunch of stuff, and there's no information about what any of it is. So, again, like Dark Souls, but not great. We're going to choose the grasping ring because it's going to because I already know that this thing is going to give us more, basically more experience. So we'll be able to show you more stuff faster. Now, the other thing is your class. Now, Ruben, you just played Dark Souls for the first time before this recording today, didn't you?
Yeah. So I played it earlier today, and yeah, because I've been very neglect, in my kind of research, and I have friends who play lots of Dark Souls. I've seen, I've watched a bit of like, playthroughs, and I've, read lots about like the design of Dark Souls. But yeah, I've never like played it until earlier today. So that was a bit of fun, and enjoyed the kind of tutorial area and the first boss, etc. And
Yes.
yeah, you're right. This is like very similar opening
Right.
in your like, class selection, etc.
Now, I want to bring it up
Plays a shit.
because, like, how did you go about choosing your first class?
Um, I pretty much chose a knight just
All
because it
right, we're choosing
was.
a knight.
Yeah, I chose a knight just because like that's kind of from what I've seen and what yeah, what I've seen from Dark Souls gameplay is kind of like the standard, uh, kind of normal way to play, and
It's
it's not
also,
going to kind of throw too many curveballs at me.
yeah, now it's also interestingly like basically the hardest way to play. It's not the
Oh, really?
hardest, but really it is. Like you're very slow. You only have melee. Like ranged is how you break the game in Dark Souls. Like it allows you to get around so many problems.
Mm.
But which is funny how Dark Souls does that. Whereas here I would say a knight is probably the strongest initial starting class for a simple clean gameplay. Now also what's cool here is they have these challenges. And you can see that you can go naked, no blocking, no healing, magic only, hardcore mode. And one of the major things that Dark Souls survives on is this ability to make you want to play through the game again. And so you say like, all right, I just beat all these really hard stuff, and now I've created this sense of a triumphant accomplishment. Let's try it with no shield. And it's like, let's try it when I can
Yeah,
only use this one spell or no weapons whatsoever, and that sort of thing. Or I cannot level up. And so they've actually worked some of that into the gameplay, which is really cool. So we've
yeah, because that's a lot of what like a lot of the like things on YouTube that make Dark Souls popular to watch. People trying these insane strategies because it's
all
known
Lobos.
its difficulty,
Yes.
and yeah, working into the gameplay like that is quite clever.
Yeah.
Making
So
that an actual feature
right
rather than an
away,
option.
we can see the core mechanics being very similar to Dark Souls. You've got your health bar, you've got your stamina bar, and the stamina bar is this thing that basically you use it to do stuff like rolling an attack. Now I'm going to let this bar fill up, and you can see how fast I'm attacking. Now when I run out of stamina, see how my attack pattern slows.
Hmm.
You see? I'm still clicking as fast as
Yep.
possible, but it really slows down. Now if I block, it'll take most of the blow, and instead of losing hit points, I lose stamina instead. And also, like Dark Souls, you've got a shield in one hand and a sword in the other. But you can switch to two-hand your weapon, and then you can't use a shield at all. You have to block with your blade, and it only prevents part of the damage, but it deals more damage. Sounds simple? Yep. Well, one of the major things about Dark Souls is you tab to this to block, and then you tab to this to attack. So we're going to be two-handing because I like great swords.
Very, very similar mechanics, even though it's converted into a 2D environment.
Oh, that guy's a dick. So we get our cool, like, take advantage of the disarming guy there. And, yeah. Now, one of the things which is interesting is that Dark Souls, it's really capturing the core physicality of the game very effectively. The fact that you've got the stamina bar that regulates your actions, and you try to dodge attacks, and you try to get damage in, and so on. Now you can see I've got my roll. Now, like the Dark Souls roll, this is based on several things. First, the reason it's so important is because it lets you dodge attacks, and while you're rolling, during a certain part of the roll, you are actually invincible entirely. So,
yep.
Which really gives you this maximum rewarding for learning how the enemy attacks. Because if you roll at the right time, you're basically invincible.
Yeah, so if you can predict their blows, and I assume that's going to be very important for boss fights, like in just like how in Dark Souls.
Yep.
So yep. You got kind of murdered.
That was the introduction of the game. This giant boss instantly kills you, and you progress. I'm not a huge fan of that. Now, Dark Souls' opening is really good. That you get this section of this giant boss that's impossible to beat, and you run from, and then he's towering over you, and then you run around the level, you get a big weapon, and you come back, and now you're towering over him from above because you're at a higher part of the level, and you drop down onto him, deal massive damage, and kill him, and you feel like, okay, that might have been an impossible challenge, but by exploring and by getting more power and by getting more stuff, and I was able to overcome that impossible challenge. Here it just says, die, never fight me again. Like, you don't come back and fight that guy later as like a boss battle, which seems like a given. It's just completely, you're never going to fight him again.
No, that does seem a little underwhelming, especially because that kind of, like, while I can see the reasoning behind, okay, we want to kind of set up that the game's hard and set up that there's failure, etc. Not being able to overcome that failure later is questionable. It's
sort of like the ideal example of the unfair challenge, which is exactly what Dark Souls is famous for not doing. Like, in fact, Dark Souls only does something very similar very late in the game with Seath, the Scaleless, which, spoiler alert, ends up just sort of auto-killing you in a have-to-lose boss fight. But even then you fight him later. So this is just not my favorite thing about the game. But what I do like is just how satisfying it is. Now, unlike Dark Souls, they sort of took a cue from Bloodborne here, in that you are rewarded heavily for being kind of aggressive in this game. Like in Dark Souls, it's mostly defensive oriented. Like, you block and then you attack, and then you block and then you attack. Whereas here, you're going to see me going like crazy. Now again, one of the major things that Dark Souls has is they got past their they basically wanted to give players hints on how to beat everything. So what they did was they gave you these little signs, like this, on these matches in a bottle. And that's obviously from a developer.
Yeah, and so these are similar to the messages on the walls, etc., that you find in Dark Souls.
Right. And also, like in Dark Souls, you can leave messages for other players, which is great because it also allows the devs to later on leave their own messages and pretend they're from other players. All right, so here's our bonfire for the evening, our sanctuary, and the game's called Salt and Sanctuary, and we level up by collecting salt from enemies, which is totally not souls. So this is our tree of skill. It's like the sphere grid in Final Fantasy. Now I'm the warrior, so I start on these nodes, whereas if I was the mage, I would start on this node. So like here are all magic upgrades and stuff. Now I could level up a bunch and walk all the way to start mastering swords if I started as a mage, or vice versa. I could walk towards the mage tree on this angle. But naturally, I have a bit more of an advantage starting here than in other places. Because like these are all magic upgrades, whereas this is a strength upgrade. So you can see this tree has a lot more strength because it's the sword fighter tree. Now our goal is going to be to pick up great swords because I love great swords. Now this node lets me wield wield a class 1 great sword, and I really want that.
Yeah, so this skill tree is quite different to how Dark Souls handles leveling up, but I really like these. Well, they're more skill spheres, right? Because it's one shared skill tree for all classes, and rather than having like individual skill trees for each class. And I find that quite an elegant game design like leveling solution because it allows you for both, you can explore the tree, to kind of plan out how you want to level up, but you can get anywhere on the tree. You're not locked out of that option by choosing a different, starting class.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it feels quite fair, even if you're never gonna decide to become a mage after starting as a knight or whatever.
Yeah, and it also, I gotta say, the advantage of it is kind of what you said. The disadvantage of it is the fact that it is fundamentally kind of confusing. That it requires a lot of micromanagement. You're like, I want to get as much strength nodes as possible. I don't want to go that node. Do I circumvent it? And so it creates this sort of strategy around your skill tree, but it also feels more invested. Whereas in Dark Souls, you're basically like, I'm leveling up. I guess I will increase the strength button. Now, Dark Souls gets interesting in its level ups because you start learning there's this really cool items that have these really cool weapons and armors that have certain stat requirements. Now, that's not apparent in the beginning, and it's not apparent in the middle, or not apparent in the end. You have to sort of FAQ all this stuff for the most part. You can look it up on the items themselves, but you have to know the item exists, know to build around it. You normally have to be building towards an item in advance if you want to use it well. And so that makes the builds really interesting. Like, okay, I just need to get to 26 faith, and then I'll be able to use this, and then I'll enter this covenant, and I'll get the lightning spear because I can get to it really early, and that sort of thing. Now, before we get now, actually, we'll just go in. One of the things I want to show you about is the way that the movesets with the weapons work in a 2D plane. Now, Dark Souls' weapons are big on sort of two things: attack rate being different and attack path. But because it's 3D, interestingly, there aren't that many things they can do with attack path. It's sort of, do I hit from the side, or do I hit from like overhead, or do I hit from all that sort of thing?
Yep. Yeah, because like, one thing I really liked is like in a narrow corridor in Dark Souls, like if you're standing like too close to the wall or whatever, you're going to hit your sword on the wall rather than hitting your enemy. It's not like a lot of other 3D games where basically the environment just doesn't matter at all to your sort of strikes.
Yeah. And one of the things they do here is they really take advantage of that, like not with the side motion because they can't, but they take added advantage of the verticality. So basically, you can see this sort of cool attack I've got right there.
That downward swing, yeah.
Yep, I can go in the midair and then I can drop on it, and also if I'm attacking in midair, I sort of hang for a second. So different weapons, do different things like that. Like there's this really cool chain whip, like the sort of chain sword mix that uses that if you right attack, it's like a chain, sort of like a whip, and if you left attack, it's like a sword, and so on. So yeah, and that really gives you the sense because you've got the added platforming elements. You get an added sense of maneuverability to your item and to your playstyle.
Yeah, and you can mix up that maneuverability as you need by, I assume, changing your armor and stuff if you're you want to get that mix of maneuverability and
absolutely,
kind of just pure armor.
So in order to, I'm going to actually do that right now. If you mentioned it, I'm going to take off my shirt and I'm going to light this thing. This is another save point. Yep, and I'm going to take off my shield. But now you can see I'm moving a lot faster. So that's the advantage, is that you can dodge stuff better at light armor than heavy armor. But if you get hit, it's going to hurt a lot more. So interestingly, in Dark Souls and in this game as well, if you heavy armor is not better than light armor. Like tattered cloth might be the best armor because it's really light, which is not at all intuitive. But makes sense if you're thinking about the game more realistically. So this is our first boss, the Sodden Knight. Now, like Dark Souls, this guy is sort of this really hard early boss. He's got several attack patterns that all require different timing, and then he changes halfway through. Like, he's really hard for a new player. Even for an experienced player, you can see. I'm taking damage.
Yeah, oof. Yeah, well, yeah, I definitely think kind of having the attack patterns that can be, learned is a lot about, like, facing the boss and a lot of the way that you can, kind of get better at playing playing against the boss, as most likely die against him a couple times first.
Yeah, that
But
predictable. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, the predictable nature of the attack is kind of what makes bosses work.
Yes, in fact, it's what makes Dark Souls work, and it's what makes Alta Sanctuary work as well. That's the most important element of this, is that Dark Souls creates that sense of triumph and fiero by giving you an impossible challenge that looks clearly impossible. There's no way a reasonable person can be expected to beat this challenge. Like, you fight a boss and he kills you in like one hit, and then you're doing like no damage, and then you think this is absurd. No one could beat this, and then you beat it. And the only way that works, in a way that's honest, is partly by you gain more power, you gain more equipment, you level up, so it fits the RPG mechanics, and partly it's by learning the guy's moves. Now I'm going to attack him.
Well, we can see here, like, you've played against this guy so many times that, like, you're pretty much messing with him at the moment.
I am. Now partly it's because I wanted to delay it so I can talk about, so you can see what happens when he gets to half health.
Yep.
There we go. And you'll see his attack pattern.
His eyes glow, and
yeah, immediately shows you stuff got serious. I noticed it the first time that I played against him. Now you see that he did his attack plus an additional attack, and now he starts really varying up his attacks just to mess with me. As you will see me take some damage here, I'm certain. Like, I've seen like hardcore. Like, really,
there's some nice visual design going on there where, like, there's really not a lot of color in this game, and then so when you see, like, oh shit, he's got glowy eyes, like, that's a bit of a warning sign.
Yep. Whoa. See, like, that.
Oof.
The knockback just really changed, so he like messes with his time a lot. Like, it's very possible I could die here. There we go. And so you think, oh, I dodged it. Like, nope. Look at that. 2 follow-ups on what used to be like a normal thing. And like and the funny thing is that he can follow up, but he doesn't always follow up at this stage. So
now you use some like a health potion or some sort here. So how does that vary from how it's handled in Dark Souls?
Basically, oof, so dead. Basically, the way it varies is very simple. You get less of them to start off.
Yep.
There's no sort of kindling mechanic. Like, there sort of is one, but not really. I'm gonna put the shirt back on,
Sure.
so that if I'm gonna be talking while playing, it's gonna be a little bit less effective. But also, the main thing about it is that in Dark Souls, you kind of gain the health the moment you actually complete the whole "I'm gaining health" ritual. Like, you drink the potion, and once you've drank the potion, your health shoots up. Now here it gives you sort of this regeneration field. So it's like you start to, whoa, see, look at that. That's not fair. It actually was totally fair. When he telegraphs that attack, he's about to do fast attacks. But you'll notice that, basically,
not doing so good today.
No, I'm not. Like, it's very difficult to be focusing on talking about it while I'm also fighting him. Because the problem is, Dark Souls, most bosses have a universal time to them, in that they have several different types of attacks that dedicate how they're going to attack. Like, this one's an AoE, this one's a magic thing, but they're all the same sort of attack. Like, they're all the same timing to it. So, like, they all have like a 2-second wind up and then they attack, or half-second wind up and then they attack. Whereas this guy has some like 2 seconds and some half-second, and so you have to really focus on his moves, which is tough because there's not much to do before you beat this guy. So it's very dangerous to have this really difficult boss early on. Like, Salt and Sanctuary kind of knows
this could potentially gate off the game from a lot of players. Like, if you're getting people kind of playing it, getting stuck here, they're not really going to enjoy the game that much if they can't beat it. Well, what I like so much about the Asylum Demon in Dark Souls is that, while that, like, first time you play him, is, I assume you can't beat him, or that it's very difficult to beat him when you've got, like, your crappy kind of broken sword or whatever. When you get the better equipment and you start above, it makes you feel really powerful, like we talked about earlier. Like, and that doesn't keep you stuck with a tutorial for ages.
Yep. And I've beaten the game multiple times, and like this, I'm having this amount of trouble with the guy. So I beat it on hardcore modes too. Well, not hardcore mode, literally. Whoa! Come on. There we go. Got him. All right. So like that's not an easy fight. It's very daring to start you that early on because again we've had no enemy here to help us build our confidence first. But when we talked about the health potions,